We heard the State of the Union address. There was a lot covered in there. I'm particularly interested in things that are of import to the business community that you know so terribly well. But let me start with one that we talk about a lot at Bloomberg. You can tell me whether we should, and that's the debt ceiling. We had the president say we're not going to default on our debt. That's reassuring. At the same time, you've been through a couple of these. Are we going to get this thing resolved before we get to the edge of the precipice?
Everybody's keeping their fingers crossed that it will be resolved. Unfortunately, there's a lot of brinksmanship involved here that's not constructive, but it would be a devastating blow to the economy for the first time in our history to allow the debt ceiling to be breached. The members of the Business Roundtable care deeply about it because they know what a big blow it would be. They're not panicked about it because everybody in Washington is telling them, don't worry, we'll work it out. The nervousness is that nobody at this point can quite define exactly what the path to working it out is likely to be.
Josh, as you know, one of the things the president addressed and got a little bit of a pushback from some people in the chamber was energy policy. And where are we on energy policy? Getting the oil companies to produce more, saying that they're holding back. That's my word, not his. What's the response of the business community to that? What should be done right now, recognizing, as the president himself admitted, we need some oil for a while here?
Yeah, well, the business community is united. We need to be on the path to transitioning away from fossil fuels, but we need those fossil fuels not just for a decade, which is what the president referred to and elicited laughter from the Republican side, not just for a decade, but for decades to come. And we need those companies, many of whom are at the forefront of creating the technologies that will help us transition away from fossil fuel. We need to have government policies that are not designed to strangle them as rapidly as possible, but rather to help give them the capital they need to make the transition. And that's where the disagreement from the business community is with a lot of Biden administration policy. We were strong supporters of many of the climate measures that were contained in the Inflation Reduction Act, but also strong supporters of the measures in there and other measures that can be done to make sure that we are taking advantage of our own resources here in the United States, which can be produced much more cleanly than almost anywhere else in the world. Which we're going to need to do for not just 10 years, but several decades to come.
One of the things we did not hear about, at least I don't recall in the State of the Union address, was any talk about the overall level of regulation, the extent to which there is regulation, something that prior administrations, such as the Trump administration, did address. From the business's point of view, how do we get the right balance, both in terms of how much regulation and where the regulation comes? Because I suspect everyone agreed there has to be some regulation.
Yeah, and you won't find a single member of the Business Roundtable saying, please put me in a completely unregulated environment. Government does have a critical role to play in protecting the health and safety of our population, and there's no resistance from the business community to that. There is deep concern in many sectors of the U.S. business community about the tendency of Biden appointees to overreach. And I'm referring now to some of what's called the quasi-independent agencies, like the SEC and the FTC, both, in our view, likely overreaching not just their statutory mandates, but also what's sensible for the economy. We need an environment where health and safety are protected and competition is protected, but to pursue a lot of social goals through the guise of that kind of regulation has really gone overboard in the Biden administration. And if anything, that may be the biggest point of friction between a lot of our business leaders and the executive branch we have in power today.
We did hear in the State of the Union address talk about taxes, both the so-called billionaires tax, but also a corporate minimum tax on stock buybacks, and referring to those infamous 55 large corporations that pay no tax. What's the reaction of the Business Roundtable to that? Is there an issue here of the fairness of the tax code?
No, is the short answer. I mean, they first, with respect to the 55 companies that supposedly paid no tax, many of them didn't make profits, or were able to use past losses to reduce their profits for the current year. But the main reason why a lot of companies ended up on that list is that they have been doing exactly what the tax code and what the government policy, and I should say Biden policy, expressly wants them to do, which is conduct R&D in the United States, invest in capital plant and equipment in the United States. And so they've been able to reduce their tax liability by taking advantage of the incentives in the tax code to invest in the United States. We want them to do that, and then to demonize them for having done that, while demanding that they stay competitive in the United States, is just a completely inconsistent and incoherent position.
So, Josh, you've gone through a variety of possible differences of opinion, if I can put it that way, between the business community and the Biden administration. And I guess my question is that a failure to communicate, or is it a true difference in policy? And I mean by that, you've served in the executive branch. Are there people in the executive branch who at least understand the arguments business is making? And I'll name a couple. Gina Raimondo has been in business. She did have her own venture capital firm. We now have Jeff Zients going in, who took a big company public. Do you have people in the administration that, whether they agree with you or disagree with you, they understand the arguments, they've been there?
Yeah, the administration has been short on those people, but you just mentioned two with whom the business community can have a really good hearing and a fair dialogue. The problem with the Biden administration has never been an unwillingness to listen. The dialogue has been civil. We've had sharp disagreements on some issues, profound agreements on other issues. I don't want to characterize the relationship, at least of my organization, with the Biden administration as uniformly bad. But we've been often disappointed that the people with whom we've had our communication with don't have the background, don't have the business experience to really appreciate what's likely to make business successful in the United States, which we all agree ought to be the goal. But I'm optimistic with folks like the two you just mentioned, Secretary Raimondo and Jeff Zients, in positions of responsibility, that we will have those good channels of communication open.